I'll start from where everyone has finished. A live-stream genocide is happening, but why should most people around the world care? You clearly do, many people do, but why should everyone care? I'll give 3 reasons. First, the indivisibility of justice, to quote Angela Davis, and the associated ethical duty to consistently stand in international solidarity with struggles against oppression everywhere. South African jurist John Dugard once said, "Palestine has become the litmus test for human rights," referring to how the global South measures the West's sincerity, or lack thereof, on human rights, partly based on how it deals with Palestine. The second issue is the intersectionality connecting the Palestinian struggle for freedom, justice, and equality with struggles for racial, indigenous, economic, social, gender, and climate justice worldwide. Israel's regime of oppression, after all, is a model for much of the world's far right. It harms not only Palestinians, but millions globally. Israel today is a partner of fascist parties in the West, most of whom are anti-Semitic to the core, and of far-right and authoritarian regimes. It sells its military security technologies, colonial doctrines as battle-tested. For instance, through the export of its weaponized spyware technologies, its disinformation and election rigging services as a diplomacy tool, Israel has for decades been a culprit in not just illegal surveillance in the West, but also war crimes perpetrated by dictatorships around the world. The West's unabashed hypocrisy on Ukraine vis-à-vis Palestine has aggravated global revulsion at the West's colonially patronizing pontification about human rights. But the West's fervent support for Israel's televised genocide in Gaza has finally shed the already torn mask of humanitarian liberalism, reducing international law to tatters, as Irish president puts it, and ushering in an unbridled era of might makes right, of what even the timid UN Secretary General calls an unprecedented era of chaos and total impunity. Everyone should have a keen interest in, not just an ethical duty of, reversing this fatal descent of humanity to the abyss. The third factor, the profound ethical obligation to do no harm and to repair harm done by you or in your name. When thousands of progressive Jewish Americans peacefully occupied the Grand Central Station in New York, they raised the slogans of "Never again for anyone" and "Not in our names," reflecting their deep understanding of this principle. In the same vein, millions around the world have marched, peacefully occupied, or disrupted business as usual with genocidal Israel and with its culprits, calling for a ceasefire, lifting the siege, and ending all military security trade with Israel. Citizens of quasi-democratic states like yours have an ethical obligation to strive within their spheres of relative influence to end state, corporate, and institutional complicity in Israel's settler colonial apartheid, and most urgently, its ongoing genocide. Not only was this beast created by British imperialism, it is fed, armed, and defended by the colonial West, led by the US. Dozens of UN experts a couple of days ago called on all states to immediately stop all arms exports to Israel, as well as to impose, quote, sanctions on trade, finance, travel, technology, and cooperation, end of quote. Still, a UK court recently dismissed a case seeking to prevent the sale of British weapons to Israel, effectively upholding the government's defense that Israel is adhering to international law and not using those weapons to commit human rights violations. Palestinians can only interpret this as a sign of deep-seated British colonial racism and dehumanization of us and of peoples of the global South more generally. Because the only way, after all, for this British court to reconcile the International Court of Justice's finding that Israel is plausibly perpetrating genocide against 2.3 million Palestinians in the occupied and besieged Gaza Strip, with the government's defense that no human rights violations have occurred, is by considering Palestinians non-human, or what I call relative humans. This racialization is not unique. It pervades Western institutions, corporations, not just governments, and it today translates into severe forms of repression and McCarthyism against those simply calling for ending Israel's genocide, let alone dismantling its 75-year-old system of settler colonial apartheid. 5 centuries of European and Euro-American colonialism, slavery, and pillage across the world cannot but leave their dehumanizing racist imprint on the cultural DNA of the West. Just as men in all societies must consciously and persistently struggle against built-in sexism and patriarchy, white societies must consciously and persistently strive to exorcise built-in racism and dehumanizing patronization. This exorcism is most effectively done in the struggle to end complicity. BDS provides the most effective and morally consistent form of solidarity to do just that. Inspired by the South African anti-apartheid struggle, the US civil rights movement, and rooted in a very long heritage of Palestinian popular nonviolent resistance, BDS was launched in 2005 by the broadest coalition in Palestinian society. It calls for ending Israel's occupation, ending its system of racial domination, which amounts to apartheid, and for the right of Palestinian refugees to return. Anchored in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and committed to intersectionality, the BDS movement has consistently and categorically opposed all forms of racism and discrimination, including anti-Black, anti-Indigenous racism, sexism, homophobia, Islamophobia, and anti-Semitism. Our movement targets complicity, not identity. To end, in her poem titled Australia's Silenced History, Indigenous Nola Gregory wrote, "Australia's dark and cloudy past was built with hate and fear. How could you stick a flag in dirt and then claim no one was here? For 60,000 years we roamed the country of our birth. Then along you came with guns in hand and killed our hope and worth." Killing hope and worth of the indigenous people is in the very fabric of settler colonial regimes like Israel's. We defend hope through resisting despair. We defend our human worth by resisting dehumanization and colonization of our minds. We defend our dreams by doing everything we humanly can to insist on rising and shining despite the horrible darkness, like a full moon reflecting the emancipating beams of light emanating from 15 million small Palestinian suns that shall not, indeed cannot, be extinguished. Thank you.